Chapter 3, Courtship Dance. One morning, after many days of clear skies, dark clouds rolled over the mountains and rain pelted down. The tule reeds of the teepee covering swelled with water and kept out the rain. The women turned from preparing food to work they could do inside the dry, cozy teepees until the storm passed. Ayla took out the hemp cord and the bear grass she needed to weave some flat belts. She dyed the bear grass soft shades of red, green, and yellow. She gave some brown cord to Kaya, then started a bag for Speaking Rain to work on. Although Speaking Rain couldn't see, she could make fine cord and could weave by touch once Ayla set the first rows. Itza and Brown Deer were mending moccasins for the twins, who napped on their deer skins. As he always did, Wing Feather slept with his hand tucked into his baby moccasin, which he cradled under his chin. For a long time they worked in silence. Kaya liked the quiet teepee. The sound of rain falling on the tule mat soothed her. In fact, she wished she could stay inside their teepee, where no one called her Magpie, and never go out again. Ayla touched Kaya's weaving to show her where her work was lumpy and uneven. "You're awake, but you're dreaming," Ayla said. "Will you tell me your dream?" Kaya undid the line of weaving and started it over. She didn't want to admit how much that nickname still troubled her. "I was dreaming about my horse," she said. "When I was a girl, we didn't dream of horses," Ayla said with a smile. "When I was a girl, we didn't even have horses. When we traveled, we walked on our own 2 feet, and our strong dogs pulled our loads for us." "You know about these things," Itza said respectfully. "But dogs couldn't pull the big loads that our horses do. And we couldn't travel as fast on foot as we can on horseback." "But our scouts could run fast," Ayla said. "The scouts who lived near the trail to enemy country ran as fast as the wind to warn us of danger." Ayla's fingers flew as she wove the bag. Already she'd finished a plain border and was adding a lovely pattern of triangles. "It's true the scouts were swift," Itza said, "but no man runs as fast as a horse. No man can travel as far on foot as he can on horseback." She began sewing a new sole onto a moccasin with the length of sinew. "Now the men ride far away, but often they don't come back for a long, long time," Ayla said. "Things were better in the old days." "I can't imagine our warriors without their horses," Brown Deer said softly. "A warrior so fierce on horseback. He fights so bravely." "Our men were brave warriors long before they ever heard of horses," Ayla said. "And because we have horses, our enemies make more raids on us." Itza said. "You're right. But without his horse, my husband wouldn't be such a good hunter. He couldn't bring us so much meat. He always gives meat to the old people, too." "Horses are so beautiful," Kaya chimed in. "Especially the spotted ones, like Steps High." She imagined her horse running with her head held high and her black tail streaming. Was it boasting to call her beautiful? Ayla reached for Kaya's bag and gently took it from her. When Ayla put the tip of her finger through a hole in a loose row, Kaya realized that she hadn't made the weaving tight enough. She began to unravel her work so that she could make it better. "Ayla, you've often said we need horses for many things," Brown Deer said. Ayla sighed deeply. "I've said so, and it's true," she said. "The old days are gone. We can't unravel our lives and begin them again, as Kaya is doing with her weaving." She put down her work and placed her hands on her knees. "But I want you to listen to me. I'm going to tell you something." Kaya and Speaking Rain laid down their weaving at once. Itza and Brown Deer stopped sewing. When Ayla spoke like that, she wanted their attention. "I've lived a long time, and I remember so many things," Ayla said. "Isn't that so?" Itza and Brown Deer nodded. Kaya and Speaking Rain said. "One thing I remember is the time of terrible sickness," Ayla said. "Traders told us about strangers with pale, hairy faces who rode from far away to trade at the big river. With the strangers on horses came a sickness of fevers and blisters, a sickness we'd never known before. My people never saw the strangers with pale faces, but their sickness came to us anyway. Many, many people sickened and died. The most powerful medicine man had no medicine to cure this new sickness." Ayla was quiet for a while, gazing into space. Then she ran her hands across her cheeks. "You see these pockmarks on my face," she said. "I was one who got the sickness. My own mother died of it. I've told you that too. These pockmarks remind me how few of us survived. They remind me that not just good things come into our lives with the horses, but the marks also remind me to be strong and help others. Kaya looked at Ayla's solemn face. She knew Ayla was thinking about the bad times in the past. Kaya was ashamed to be worrying about an unpleasant nickname when so much suffering had come to others. Would difficult times like the sickness come again to Nimmy Poo? We've talked enough of that, Ayla said. It's time to go back to work. Kaya began her weaving again, making each twist of cord as firm and as tight as possible. When she grew up, she wanted to be a wise, strong woman like Ayla. The men are getting out the drums again, Speaking Rain said. Soon they'll start singing. Listen! Kaya listened. From across the camp came the first drum beats. Every evening, drumming, songs, and laughter filled the air. In the middle of the camp, Tota and some other men were playing the stick game, joking and shouting as they made their guesses. The women watched and chatted with their friends. The children chased each other and played games. Soon there would be dancing too, until it was time for the men to light fires along the riverbank and begin their night fishing. Kaya loved being part of so much excitement. In their teepee, Kaya watched Brown Deer dressing herself for the courtship dance. Brown Deer put on her best dress, decorated with porcupine quills and elk teeth. She tied on her wide belt and hung a small woven bag from it. She smoothed the ankle flaps of her moccasins and tied them neatly. Your dress is so beautiful, Kaya exclaimed. Speaking Rain folded her arms and grinned up at her older sister. Tell us, what do you want to dance to tonight? Tell us, who do you want to dance with tonight? I don't know, Brown Deer said with a shrug and the flicker of a smile. As Brown Deer hurried to join the others, Kaya thought her big sister was the prettiest girl in the whole village. Kaya and Speaking Rain followed her out of the teepee. In the light of the rising moon, the twins were dancing, hopping about and bobbing their heads like quail. Wingfeather beat two sticks together. Sparrow turned around and around until he was dizzy and fell to his knees. Kaya was too young to join the courtship dance, but the drum beats and singing made her want to whirl around and around like Sparrow. They made her want to beat the rhythm like Wingfeather. As Kaya listened, she practiced dancing by taking small steps, moving in place. Who could resist the drums? On one side of the clearing, the older girls began to form a circle. The older boys formed a circle around the girls for the courtship dance. In this dance, a boy tried to dance beside the girl he liked best. If a girl let him stay by her side, that meant she liked him best too. Most families decided who would marry whom, but some paid attention to the choices of the dancers in the courtship dance. Brown Deer is dancing near us, Kaya whispered to Speaking Rain. Is she looking at any special boy? Speaking Rain asked. She looks at all the boys but one, Kaya said. She never looks at Cut Cheek. Cut Cheek was slim and strong. He was a good hunter and a good dancer too. The scar on his cheek only made him better looking, Kaya thought. She'd often seen him glance at Brown Deer as he danced. But Brown Deer never returned his gaze. When Cut Cheek comes near, Brown Deer looks at her moccasins, Kaya said. I don't think she likes them at all. Speaking Rain giggled. Kaya, you're foolish, she said. If Brown Deer can't bring herself to look at Cut Cheek, that means she really likes him. But how will he know she likes him if she never looks at him, Kaya wondered. He'll know, Speaking Rain said. All the young men and women were in the circle now. When the drum beats changed, the boys and girls danced slowly forward toward each other. The long fringes on the girls' dresses rippled and swung as the girls moved. The drum seemed to be saying, Come dance with me. Dance with me. With exciting music like this, how could the dancers keep their steps so steady and even? Where's Cut Cheek dancing? Speaking Rain asked. He's on the other side of the circle, Kaya said. I don't think he'll be able to get near Brown Deer. The dancers moved close to each other, then away, then close again. The next time they were close, a boy eased himself out of his line and placed a stick on a girl's right shoulder. She kept the stick on her shoulder and made room for him by her side. Now they dance as a couple. The dancers moved toward each other again. As they advanced, Cut Cheek managed to move past the boy next to him. Now he was almost in front of Brown Deer. She held her chin high and looked straight ahead. She made the fringe on her dress snap with each graceful step. What's happening now? Speaking Rain demanded. Cut Cheek keeps moving closer to Brown Deer, Kaya said. Again the dancers moved forward. The boy called Jumps Back moved opposite Brown Deer. He was short with broad shoulders. Although he often liked to tease the girls, now he looked very serious. When Brown Deer danced close to him, Jumps back stepped beside her and placed his stick on her shoulder. With a shrug, she knocked the stick off. Jumps back bent to pick up his stick, and Cut Cheek moved into his place. Now he was opposite Brown Deer. Brown Deer just turned down Jumps back, Kaya told Speaking Rain. Cut Cheek is right in front of her, but she's looking past him as if she doesn't even know he's there. Oh, she knows he's there, Speaking Rain giggled. The next time the dancers were close, Cut Cheek left the boys' line. His dark face was gleaming. He stepped next to Brown Deer and placed his stick on her shoulder. Blushing, she took a deep breath, as if she were about to dive into deep water. She let his stick stay on her shoulder, and they danced now, side by side. She chose Cut Cheek, Kaya said. She didn't hesitate for a moment. The run of salmon up the river was coming to an end. Many salmon had given themselves to Nimmy Poo. The women had packed the dried salmon into large woven bags and parfleshes made of rawhide. Now they were packing up their belongings as well. Soon the women would roll up the tool mat coverings of the teepees and take down the teepee poles. They would put everything they owned on their horses and the travois and set it out. It was time to move higher into the mountains so the women could pick huckleberries and the men could hunt for elk and deer. Kaya and her family would be part of the group traveling back to Salmon River country. Ayla called Kaya to her. She looked worried. I think I left my knife where we were working yesterday, Ayla said. I'll go look carefully, Kaya said. Kaya already had a rope bit on Steps High. She'd been riding her horse every day, keeping her tightly reined in and held to a trot. Steps High hadn't once tried to buck off Kaya, but Kaya hadn't yet asked Tota if it was safe to run her horse again. May I come with you, Kaya? Speaking Rain asked. Kaya gave Speaking Rain her hand and pulled her sister up onto the horse to sit behind her. Riding bareback, they trotted away from the camp. At the river, they passed Tota and a few other men fishing for the last of the salmon. As the men speared fish, Foxtail and some other boys put the salmon into baskets. Tota stood on the bank with his back to the sun. He had placed a large white stone in the current where the river was shallow. When a fish swam between the white stone and Tota, he could see its outline and spear it. Downstream, where the river was deeper, Ayla had been cleaning fish on the bank the day before. Kaya reined in Steps High. I'll start searching a little way down the path and make my way back to you, Kaya told Speaking Rain. Wait here to mark where I started my search. Speaking Rain slipped off Steps High. As Kaya rode on down the path, she looked for her grandmother's knife. Steps High was tense and skittish. She shied at a garter snake crossing the path, but Kaya steadied her. When Steps High shied a second time, Kaya reined her in. What's the matter, girl? Kaya asked. What's spooking you? Steps High snorted and pawed the ground. Kaya shaded her eyes and looked back to where Speaking Rain had been waiting. Speaking Rain was cautiously making her way through the elderberry bushes that grew along the river bank. She couldn't know there was a steep bank on the other side of the bushes. Stop, Speaking Rain, Kaya called. She turned Steps High and started back. Speaking Rain didn't seem to hear Kaya's call. Were stick people leading her astray? She kept going. Stop! Don't take another step, Kaya cried. Now Speaking Rain heard Kaya's cry. She stopped and turned. As she did, a piece of the bank crumbled beneath her feet. Speaking Rain fell backward. In a shower of stones, she tumbled into the swift river. Chapter 4. Rescued from the River. Kaya drove Steps High forward. She jumped her over the bushes and reined her in sharply, her hooves plowing the ground. Speaking Rain was struggling in deep water, trying to swim toward shore. As she thrashed, a branch plunged down in the swift current and hit her. She went under. When she came up again, she was being pulled downstream in the powerful surge of the river. Fear struck through Kaya like a lightning flash. If Speaking Rain wasn't pulled from the river, she'd drown. If Kaya tried to swim after her, they could both drown. To save Speaking Rain, Kaya's only hope was to run her horse along the bank, try to get ahead of Speaking Rain, and run into the river to catch her. Kaya gave her horse head, then kicked her. Steps High burst forward. In a few strides, she was at a full gallop. Kaya leaned low over her neck, clasping her horse with her knees. What if another piece of riverbank gave way? What if her horse bucked? Steps High lengthened out and tore around the next bend, then the next. She seemed as swift as a hawk diving from the sky. Now they were ahead of Speaking Rain, who flailed in the churning river. From here, Kaya had to get her horse into the water and then swim upstream to meet Speaking Rain as she was swept down. Would Steps High obey Kaya's command to swim? Kaya dug her heels into the horse's sides and again urged her forward. Steps High crossed the beach, but paused at the edge of the water. "Come on, girl," Kaya said, giving her another kick. Then Kaya felt Steps High become one with her again. The horse moved out into the icy current until she was swimming. Kaya angled her horse upstream. She held tightly to Steps High's mane to keep her balance against the swirling currents. She'd have to catch Speaking Rain as soon as she came within reach, or else Speaking Rain would be swept under the horse's sharp hooves. In another moment, Speaking Rain was upon her. Kaya reached and grasped, caught her arm. She had her. She pulled and dragged Speaking Rain over her horse's withers. Holding Speaking Rain tightly, Kaya turned her horse downstream. She felt Steps High gather herself. The horse's strokes evened out as she calmed, but Speaking Rain was limp against Kaya. Was she breathing? Kaya headed Steps High towards shore. In a few more strokes, her horse's hooves touched bottom. Steps High's head came up, and she climbed onto the sandy beach. She shook her head and pranced a step or two as if she knew she'd done something to be proud of. Kaya slid off her horse and caught Speaking Rain as her sister slipped down into her arms. Speaking Rain lifted her head, moaned, and began to cough up water. "You're safe, Speaking Rain," Kaya said against her drenched head. "You're safe." Tota appeared on the bank above them. He was followed by the other fishermen and by Foxtail. Tota leaped down onto the sand. He took Speaking Rain into his arms, bent her forward, and slapped her back with his cupped hand to force more water from her. Kaya's teeth were chattering. "Speaking Rain, can you get your breath?" she asked. Speaking Rain gasped. "I heard you shout and I ran," Tota said. "I saw what happened. You did well, Kaya. Your horse did well, too." "Steps High knew Speaking Rain needed us," Kaya said. "She did everything I asked of her." "She did what you asked because she trusts you," Tota said. "You've earned her trust. Remember that." Foxtail crouched on the bank. Was that a look of admiration in his eyes? "You told me you couldn't race," he said. "But you were racing like wildfire, Kaya." "Kaya wasn't racing to be the fastest," Tota corrected him. "She was racing to save Speaking Rain's life." Tota's words lifted Kaya's heart. He knew she hadn't acted for herself, but for Speaking Rain. And Foxtail had called her Kaya, not Magpie. Kaya closed her eyes, pressed her face against Steps High's warm, wet neck, and felt the powerful pulse beating there. "Katsi yow yow, my horse," she whispered gratefully. Then she held the bridle so that Tota could lift Speaking Rain onto Steps High's back, and they could take her back to camp. The horses needed fresh grass before they could begin the journey higher into the mountains. Kaya rode with Raven, Foxtail, and some older boys and girls to herd the horses to new pasture. As Kaya rode, she gazed up at a tall peak. She knew the story of how the mountain came to be. An old chief had a vision. His vision told him that men with pale faces would come to steal the shining rocks scattered here. To protect their shining rocks, the people gathered them into a pile and built the mountain over them to hide them. Their treasure was saved because of the old chief's vision. Kaya thought that if she'd lived in those days, she'd have helped build the mountain over the shining rocks. After all, her name, Kaya Atonmi, meant she who arranges rocks. Her mother gave her that name because the first thing she saw after Kaya's birth was a woman arranging rocks to heat a sweat lodge. Will one of us be given a vision someday, Kaya wondered? Will I? She knew that one day soon, like all the other boys and girls, she would go on her vision quest. Will I be ready when that time comes, she thought? When she went into the mountains on her quest, Kaya would seek her Wayakin. If her Wayakin came to her, she could also receive special powers. Would the hawk give her ability to see far? Would the canyon wren give her the power to defend her family, the way the wren drives off rattlesnakes? What creature will my Wayakin be, Kaya wondered. She hoped it would give her powers and a vision to help Nimipoo, like the old chief in the story. Foxtail rode past, his big roan kicking up a cloud of dust. Foxtail's too much of a rascal to become a leader of our people, Kaya thought. But maybe the old chief, whose vision saved the shining mountain, had once been a bothersome boy like Foxtail. Kaya reminded herself to think of the work of the day and to do her job well. A frisky young stallion bolted out of the herd and passed behind Kaya and her horse. Immediately, she swung Steps High around, dug in her heels, and galloped after the runaway. Steps High knew her job, too. In a burst of speed, she caught up to the frisky horse and drove him back into the herd again. "Tots," Kaya said, and patted Steps High's shoulder. "Tots, my beautiful horse."